Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a topic that honestly feels like it was ripped straight out of a sci-fi blockbuster. Actually, scratch that. It's not even science fiction anymore. It is unfolding in laboratories right now. We're going to explore the absolutely fascinating and frankly, kind of terrifying world of human genetic engineering. We'll break down the science that makes it all possible, the harsh medical realities, and the massive ethical dilemmas that currently have the entire scientific community on high alert. Okay. Let's do a quick thought experiment. I want you to picture this. You're sitting in a super high-end clinic in California, and the year's 2026. The interior is pristine white, the lighting is incredibly calming. A doctor smiles at you across a sleek glass table and slides an iPad your way. And on that screen, it simply says, Embryo Selection Portal. You see, you aren't just there to have a baby. You're there to design one. What if you literally had the power to engineer the next generation?
Suddenly, human life is presented to you like a customizable menu. You swipe right for ocean blue or honey amber eyes. You literally just click a button to make sure your child grows to be at least 6 feet tall. You select a cognitive index that puts them in the top 2% globally. And then, the most appealing part of the whole shebang, you toggle a few switches to completely eliminate the risk of cancer, diabetes, and HIV. This is that ultimate utopian promise, right? Eradicating hereditary disease. But at the same time, it forces us to confront this deeply unsettling reality. We be treating human life like a bespoke, customizable product you just order off an app.
Now, to wrap our heads around how this is even a real conversation, we've got to look at the science. At the absolute heart of this revolution is something called CRISPR-Cas9, discovered and developed in 2012, which actually won the Nobel Prize in 2020, by the way. CRISPR basically acts like a pair of microscopic molecular scissors. Every single human being is built on a DNA code made up of 3 billion microscopic letters. 3 billion! And CRISPR allows scientists to go into that impossibly vast code, zero in on a highly specific sequence, and actually cut, edit, or paste genetic information. It is incredibly elegant in theory. First, a guide RNA locates the specific target gene hiding somewhere in those 3 billion letters. Second, the Cas9 enzyme acts as the scissors and cuts the DNA strand at that exact, precise spot. And finally, a new desired genetic sequence is pasted right in there, or the problematic gene is just disabled entirely. Theoretically, this means we can go into a human embryo and just delete the genetic code responsible for devastating conditions like thalassemia or blindness. It's a genuine medical marvel. Section 1. The turning point, where science fiction becomes reality. Because, well, science is a tool, right? And sometimes people push tools way past their intended limits. We've actually already witnessed the shocking moment when theoretical science crossed a hard ethical line and permanently changed human history. Back in November 2018, at an international science conference in Hong Kong, a Chinese scientist named He Zhengku stepped onto the stage and completely stunned the world. He announced that he had created the first-ever gene-edited babies, twin girls known by the pseudonyms Lulu and Nana. He used CRISPR to modify their CCR5 gene, basically trying to make them resistant to HIV, which was a virus their father carried. The global scientific community was absolutely outraged. They literally called it the murder of ethics. The Chinese government swiftly sentenced him to 3 years in prison and fined him over 400 grand. But here's the kicker. After his release, he opened a brand new lab in Beijing and recently told the New York Times that he remains, quote, proud of his work. But the contrast between his big, utopian promises and the actual medical reality is incredibly stark. It really shows the extreme danger of rushing this kind of nascent technology. The intended result was perfect HIV resistance for Lulu and Nana. But the actual, tragic medical reality? Research institutes later confirmed that the CRISPR edits didn't even work properly. The twins suffer from something called mosaicism, meaning different cells in their bodies literally have completely different DNA. They have unedited genes sitting right alongside incorrect accidental mutations, so they still carry the risk of HIV, plus an array of entirely new unknown risks for cancer and immune disorders. Their overall life expectancy might have been significantly reduced. It is just a massive, heartbreaking reminder that we are tampering with an insanely complex biological system that we do not fully understand yet. Which brings us to Section 2, Prevention versus Enhancement. So where exactly do we draw the line between preventing a lethal disease and artificially upgrading a human being? There's a massive medical and philosophical chasm between those two things. And this distinction is exactly why major medical bodies are stepping in and hitting the brakes. Take the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, or the ASRM. They recently put out a very definitive stance on polygenic embryo screening, or PGTP, which is the tech clinics use to try and score embryos for complex traits.
Their ethics committees explicitly stated that this is a nascent and unproven technology that simply should not be used clinically right now.
And their reasons for hitting the brakes make a lot of sense. The ASRM points out that our current predictive models just don't have enough data. I mean, we really have an incomplete understanding of how specific genes interact with a person's future environment, their diet, their lifestyle, the whole picture. On top of that, our current genomic data severely lacks diverse representation. So offering these genetic scores right now risks highly misleading patients about what can actually be guaranteed. But beyond just the hard science, the ASRM is warning about severe ethical issues, especially when it comes to equity, patient autonomy, and the huge potential for biased risk assessments.
And honestly, this leads us to a pretty terrifying socioeconomic what if. If this technology actually gets commercialized, what happens to the rest of humanity? Are we going to see society completely bifurcate into two biological classes? Just imagine a world where the ultra-wealthy can afford premium biological upgrades for their kids, enhanced IQs, optimized physical traits, total disease immunity, while the rest of the world continues to rely on standard natural birth. We wouldn't just be talking about financial inequality anymore, we'd be talking about biological inequality, permanently baked into our very DNA.
Section 3. The Shadow of Eugenics.
To really grasp the gravity of that kind of biological inequality, we kind of have to look backward for a second. You know the saying, history often repeats itself? Well, understanding our past is absolutely crucial if we want to navigate this deeply controversial future responsibly. And honestly, there is a chilling thematic overlap here. Back in 1883, Francis Galton introduced this concept of eugenics, the idea that the human race could be actively improved if only those with so-called strong genes were allowed to reproduce. Now today, obviously we don't use that word. We call it modern reproductive choice or disease prevention. But critics are quick to point out that using clinical screening and gene editing to artificially select and enhance desired traits in our offspring, it stems from the exact same core pursuit of genetic perfection.
And we really cannot forget the devastating consequences of that pursuit. Eugenics wasn't just some harmless, abstract theory. It became a horrific reality. Starting in 1907, laws here in the United States led to the forced sterilization of over 60,000 Americans who the state arbitrarily deemed mentally unfit. And that exact same philosophy was later weaponized during World War II by Hitler in his absolute nightmare pursuit of a master race, which resulted in the murder of millions of disabled individuals and Jewish people. Now, after the war, the term eugenics was rightfully completely discredited. But it really leaves us with this heavy question. Did the underlying desire to engineer a better human race actually disappear? Or did it just quietly evolve into a sterile, well-lit clinic with an iPad menu? And finally, Section 4, the future of human evolution. Believe it or not, genetic engineering might actually just be one small piece of a much more massive evolutionary shift. While gene editing is our current reality today, some futurists are already predicting an even more radical transition. Looking ahead to 2035 and beyond, theoretical models suggest humanity could branch out into multiple post-human entities. We're talking about synth, manufactured beings made of synthetic materials with AI-driven emotional behaviors. Hybrids, where human and animal genetics are literally merged, like growing human organs inside animal embryos for transplants. Then there are cyborgs, humans who are cognitively enhanced by brain-computer interfaces, which, by the way, is already starting to happen with neural implants. We have humanoids, AI machines that are physically and behaviorally indistinguishable from us. And most radically, neuromorphs, where human consciousness is theoretically transferred entirely into a digital system, letting us escape biology altogether. The boundaries of biological life as we know it might literally be dissolving right before our eyes. Which leaves us right here staring at a profound philosophical crossroads. Between designer babies, CRISPR therapies, and cognitive enhancements, we are rapidly acquiring the power to play creator. So the defining question we have to ask ourselves is this: are we redesigning humanity for the better, curing immense suffering and advancing our species? Or, in our endless pursuit of biological perfection, are we fracturing the human race forever? It's something we all need to think critically about, because the future isn't just a science fiction movie anymore. It is already being written in the labs of today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning what you learn.